Hey folks, it's Jeff Gothelf here with Jess McMullin. What's up, Jess?
Hey,
We
doing great.
that's good. We're worlds apart physically. Jess is in Western Canada, and I am in Eastern Spain, and so there's an ocean between us and a lot of landmass. But we've been talking a lot lately about this idea of lean service design and really trying to get our heads around it because we feel there's a real opportunity here to introduce a conversation, maybe reintroduce a conversation that we've been kicking around for the last couple of years. And we wanted to chat and really talk through what we mean by lean service design. And so I think to get started, since Jess is the service designer in this conversation, I'd love to get your elevator pitch for what is service design? Like, how would you pitch that to somebody in an elevator?
Well, service design is just taking all the different pieces of how somebody gets something done and making sure that they work well together so that that person has a good experience and that you get value not only for that person, but also for the service provider. So the thing that just, oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, to me, that sounds like user experience design. How is that
Well,
different?
I think there's two things. Maybe in the late 90s it was user experience design, but since then user experience has really become focused on creating digital products, digital services. And service design steps back from that and looks at what's your experience in the world, in those different places where you might have an interaction trying to achieve a goal, and whether that's on the phone or face-to-face, through print, or through digital products. And so it's actually looking at that whole experience that people have and how it works together. Certainly, many of the same principles of UX as far as being human-centered and iterative and prototyping, but maybe zooming out a level beyond what UX is typically practiced.
Got it. And so it's, there were words that were thrown around for a bunch of years, and maybe I'm dating myself again here, but things like cross-channel design or omni-channel design.
Right.
Is that service design?
Service design certainly works in cross-channel and omni-channel design. I think if you're looking for a discipline for omni-channel design, then that's service design.
Got it. Understood. And so it's really so it's not just digital. It's not just physical. It could be the phone. I call up the phone and I get somebody in a call center, and then the handoff from the call center to somebody else in the organization, or when I walk into a facility, whether it's a retail facility or a government facility, those are all the components of the service that I'm receiving.
Absolutely, because a service is just something that somebody does for somebody else and that creates value for both of them.
Got it.
And that's a distinction from a product where something does something for you that helps you out.
Got it. I don't think we have enough time to open up that is it a product or is it a service can of worms on this one. But I like the way you distinguish those two things, which is good. Talk to me a little bit about sort of the conventional methods of doing service design, the pros and the cons of each one of those.
Sure. So the canonical service design method, which I think has been adopted far and wide, is a journey map. So how do you have a diagram that shows somebody's experience over time and their interactions at different points in that journey or in that experience? And following on a journey map, which is talking about an individual or maybe a persona's experience, that the next level of service design deliverable that's pretty typical and maybe not as widely distributed is the idea of a service blueprint. There you're taking pretty much the same axis, somebody's experience over time, but the layers, instead of describing that experience, they're describing the operations that the organization needs to take in order to deliver on that experience. So what happens at those different touch points and throughout that set of interactions over time that somebody has. So what do you need to do as an organization in order to deliver on that experience? And that's a service blueprint. So lots of details about what's happening at the front of house, the back of house, and the underlying support systems for that.
There's an acronym we used in the Lean UX book called BDUF. We always said BDUF, big design up front, right?
Yeah.
And to be fair, in that book, we painted big design up front as a challenge to be overcome in designing and shipping digital products
Mm-hmm.
and services. It sounds to me like there's a lot of big design up front in service design. Is that an accurate statement?
I think in a lot of conventional service design practice, absolutely true. Lots of a big discovery process. We're going to go out and do ethnographic research and understand people in context and actually follow along that service journey. And then to document it, whether it's in blueprints or journey maps, and being able to start to say, well, here are the different opportunities within that service blueprint to start to make a difference in how we operate. So there's current state and future state of both journeys and blueprints that we might be looking at.
Got it. Look, the world that I come from, at least most recently, certainly the last 6 to 10 years or so, has been really focused on bringing a lean and agile approach to mostly digital product design and development. I've been fortunate enough to do a little bit of work with physical product design as well, and I found the ideas to generally resonate with that audience as well. And look, the goal of the material that we wrote about in Lean UX and Sense and Respond and in other books as well has always been focused on reducing risk of building things that people don't want, that don't deliver the value that you talked about. Sort of, I'm delivering a service, and both I want to make sure that value actually gets delivered. Everything that we've talked about was, well, how do we make sure that happens, or how do we make sure that wherever we choose to invest stands the highest likelihood of delivering that value? And so we focus on reducing that risk by experimentation, by continuous learning, by doing less work to learn, and then based on the changes that we see in the behavior of the users of the system, we then decide to invest further or to not invest further. Now look, with digital product services and continuous software, it's easy. I mean, theoretically, right? I mean, at least all the pieces are there. Culturally, that's a different recording. But the pieces are there to iterate on a digital product or a digital service very, very quickly. Right? We can do it, as fast as we want, really. When you think about applying that kind of mental model to service design, particularly when it involves physical components, buildings, service deliverers of service, government officials, doctors, clerks, right? That type of thing. Have you seen experiments done, or how have you seen people test whether or not these services actually make sense?
Sure. Well, in service design practice broadly, lots of work on prototyping services too, though sometimes through tools like improv, role-playing, as well as actually mocking something up as like a physical office and walking people through it. But I think even a lot of those efforts, like, oh, we're going to create a hotel lobby out of foam core at 1-to-1 scale. Right. It's such a big effort to prototype. Of course, it's less effort than actually building the building, but it's a lot more effort than just trying to work something out really quickly. I was working on a project that was redesigning the in-person service delivery at a government counter that was the frontline counter for all of this particular government. So they have 62 locations across the jurisdiction, and they're implementing some new digital technology, because when we do digital transformation, it actually starts to impact the real world. So we need to start to think about some of those service design principles as we transform the organization. And so we were looking at, how does digital impact the delivered experience at these physical offices?
Right.
So I basically lived for a month. I got to go home on weekends, but we actually came in for a few days to just understand the rhythm of the office. And we did workshops with all the frontline staff of saying, we think there are these areas that could be improved. What do you think we could do? And we created a matrix of prototyping opportunities in 3 different categories, from kind of simple to intermediate to advanced levels of commitment from the staff, because most of the prototyping was about them doing their job differently rather than necessarily physically changing the layout of the office. Then over the next 3 weeks, every week we would make changes, we'd roll them out, the staff would try them out and give us feedback. We'd also sit and do things like count how many people came in the door and went the wrong way, which was a problem at the start in that particular office. And we made some changes in layout and signage to help people flow better. And basically, over 3 iterations, we were able to improve the office experience there and extract principles and ideas for that we created, so that the other 61 offices would start to be able to adopt those themselves, and then we could look at how we would scale that by having people who'd gone through that experience be more involved as ambassadors going forward. So we were able to actually apply that lean approach in a very physical service design context, where we were looking at digital, signage, physical interactions, what people were doing on the phone, paper forms, and seeing how those things came together in a very rapid cycle.
I love that. Because it lines right up with the way that I teach this approach to, again, usually digital product teams. I always ask them when they design their first set of experiments, I say, what can you do today? If I gave you a day, what could you test? What kind of experiment could you run today? And what would you learn from that experiment? And then I say, what if I gave you a week? What would you do in a week? And what could you learn in that week? And then what if I gave you a month? So we give them those 3 different time frames. And everything you just described is exactly that. Like in the first day, we just asked them to change what they do at the counter. And then we tried different office layouts. And then we tried a combination of all of those things. And ultimately yielding, I love the fact that it yielded principles. So not a recipe to ship out to 61 other offices, right? But a set of principles that says, look, this is how we deliver service at this organization. And here's an example of how we put that into action over here. And now it's up to you to scale this out and move that forward. That's amazing. And a really good example. Look, this is fun. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation about this. This is just the kind of beginning. I hope to do this a bit more as we explore this concept of lean service design and get more of these ideas out into the world. If you have any feedback for us, feel free to send us either of us a message or drop a comment in the comments section. I think that's what it's for usually. In there. Jess, thanks so much for spending a couple of minutes with me today.
Thanks, Jeff. Have a great day.